My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to, do a recap and take up some of the question and answers that came up in the WhatsApp forum and other online platforms regarding what we have covered, particularly the last few weeks that we covered on birth, death, reincarnation, and I want to talk about, I think from this prompted quite a lot of questions and discussions in the forum. And I think one of the questions that is asked is that, what is our destiny? And so let me read you the questions that came. The first question is, what is our destiny? What basically is asking, what's the purpose of life, right? And then the second question is that in many spiritual and religious teachings, practice living, that they teach practicing, in detachment in order to reach liberation and enlightenment. And the third question is that, and that follows with, to reach this final goal, if we are looking for this liberation, why do we go to work or have a family, or why are we here? This is the whole question that we are going to dwell on today. A big question, but an important question. And the last question is that in many religious belief, it is said that there will be rebirth, and the question is that if there's rebirth, population should be the same, right? Should be at some steady state. But as our population is increasing, are there new souls being created? So very important question. And also the question, what is Paranjyothi Mahan's thoughts, views, words on these questions? Very pertinent question. I won't address all three questions today, but I'll address the first question, which is a very important question. I'm sure that, some point in our lives, we are all busy with, most people are busy with things in their lives, material world. You go to school, you go to university, and then get a job, start a family, then you, start investing into a home and many other things. And then you work for 20, 30 years, paying, for all these things that you want in life. And then there comes a point you retire. And if you're lucky, we live long, up to maybe 75, 76, or the average age for males are about 76, and women are about 78. And if you're lucky, some can live above that, so that's considered bonus. Going through, and then some point, the body, becomes frail. The body becomes, all the diseases come in, and it depends on how we keep our body. And so many things we experience, good things and exuberant moments, exciting moments, eureka moments, but we also experience challenges, deaths, disease, sometimes disappointments, a whole range of things. So there are, bags of good things and bags of challenging things, and some are able to cope very well, others find it more challenging. So we go through this in different phases of our lives. And there comes a stage in our lives, we start reflecting our own life, and we ask, why am I here? What's my purpose in life? Is this just, day in, day out, we do the same thing, and basically, after you experience all this, we're all going to die anyway. So why are we here? And what's the whole role? So this is something that, some people think about it. Many don't think about it. They just go on with their lives, and something difficult happens in their lives. Then they start thinking, why is this happening to me? And, some people blame others, including God or the divinity. Others just go on with life, and so we have different facets, different approaches, different things that people do. But there's a deep question that we all ask: why am I here? What's my purpose in this life? So I want to spend today on discussing this from all the things that we have studied, looked at carefully. We've covered quite a lot of ground, but let's take a kind of a stop here and reflect back what we have covered. So why am I here? What is the purpose of life? The question is that, what is our destiny, right? This journey, where are we heading, So this is the question that is, what is the purpose of life and what is our destiny? This is the first big question that if you have not asked this question, some point in your life, you will ask this question. So here it is that how people who have thought about these questions, introspected deeply, reflected of their own lives, contemplate, okay, where am I going and what is the journey that this thing called life? And finally, when they start meditating deeply to understand this material world, they realize that, using your material mind to understand the material world can be challenging. And the great saints and sages and Mahans teaches us that if you want to understand life, you have to understand, that which gives life. If you want to understand the creation, you need to understand the creator. So again, this journey then goes that, our body itself is material and it goes through changes. While it's going through changes, sometimes it's hard to focus on what's constant. And if you focus on the body and all the desires and the material mind that is craving for the things, worldly things that are continuously in a state of flux, in the state of changing, we find it hard to hold on to it. And what is real? What is changing cannot be the truth, because truth is something that does not change. So is there something in us that is changing, and is there something in us that is changeless? And this is the journey that the great saints have taken. They say that anything in life, when they observe, the changing substratum is operating in a changeless substratum. So the first thing they see is that if for the cars or the bullock carts to pass through a road, the road has to be fixed. If the road itself is moving, then you get confused on the direction you're taking. So we see that, so they realize that for a stable ride or journey, there must be a fixed ground, whether it's the road or whether it's the railway tracks, so you need to have a kind of a fixed ground. In that same way, our world is changing. We're always experiencing new things. So the Mahans and all say, well, the vehicle is moving, but it's moving, or the vehicle here is the body is moving, but it's moving must be on a substratum that is not moving. And this is where the exploration starts. So if we are looking for a purpose in our lives, what is it that we are supposed to do? Then the question is that, what life are we talking about? We're talking about our material world. There are a lot of things that are changing. To answer that question, we cannot focus on that which is changing. We have to focus on that which is, because the road tells you where it is going, but the vehicle uses the road to get there, right? The same thing, the track tells you, okay, we are going from point A to point B, and the train is the one that makes that journey. In that same way, when we ask, there's a journey that we are going, do we understand what that track is and what that direction it is going? So Mahans and great saints started thinking about this, and they started meditating deeply, and they started slowly retreating from the material world to understand that substratum that is not moving. They know that when they focus on the body and the material mind that is constantly galloping and moving, you would not understand these changes that are happening. To understand this changing landscape, they need to understand the changeless landscape. So the purpose of life that is continuously in a state of flux can only be understood if you understand that which is supporting it. Right? So destiny. So what is our destiny? Where are we heading? We only know where we're heading if we know the road that we are taking. If I'm taking Federal Highway from Klang, and if I go on the Federal Highway, I know I'm going in the direction of Kuala Lumpur. As I'm going towards Kuala Lumpur, I will pass by Shalam, I'll pass by, Bandar Sunway, and so on. But clearly, I need to understand Federal Highway. If I took North-South Highway, then I need to understand that fixed track that will give me that journey, either in the direction of north, northern state, or the southern state. So in that same way, the great Mahans realize that we need to understand that substratum that is not changing so that we know the direction that we are taking. So this is a beautiful quote that says that the purpose of life is a life of purpose, right? When your life is of no purpose, that means you don't have that understanding of, the value of your life, you see that the purpose is also lost, So try to ponder this statement very, very carefully. It says that the purpose of life is a life of purpose. So there must be a purpose in all our lives. You see, there must be a value for our lives. So the whole idea is that when you travel, say, suppose you're traveling on a holiday to a particular country. You've never been to a country such as Switzerland. You've never experienced snow, the mountains, and so on. And when we say that we are going there, the whole idea is that it's an experience that we have never experienced, and that we want to understand what being in the winter, being in these mountains. So it's that experience, the subject in us is lived in a climate where you don't have winter, the 4 seasons. You want to be able to experience that. That's why we go on travels, to be able to learn and experience. That leads to us, why are we here, right? If the soul or the spirit is seen as infinity or formless, dimensionless, then the question is that if this substratum is formless and dimensionless, what is it to be in a finite body, in a formed body that is continuously changing, in a limitedness, right? So the limitless can only experience limitedness if it takes on a limited body to experience that limitedness. If I want to experience winter, I've got to go to a country where winter storms are there. If I want to experience a mountainous region, how it is, the altitude, I have to go there and experience. In that same way, if I want to experience the limitedness existence in a body, one would have to take that body to experience it, or experience it in a body. I'll come back to the purpose. Whenever we ask the purpose of life, the question is that it is about understanding life of purpose. That means understanding the purpose that you're here for. So let's take that journey very carefully. So the whole idea is that the purpose of life is essentially to know the self. Who am I? What is this? The person that is asking this question is that, yes, we have a body, but there is something in us that is enabling this body to experience this. We call that self, we call it Roh, we call it many, many names, Atma. So, but what is this true self? Is he? What is, if I say true self, then is there something that is a not true self? This is the part that we really have to think very carefully. Whenever we say the self, oftentimes we associate with our material body, a name given to the material body, the position, the title, the qualifications, and all that. So this is what Swamiji called the small I, or the small self, right? So which is continuously changing. Even our own material personality continuously changes, from babyhood right up to as we go to adulthood. But is there a true self? If there is a true self, I know that the small I, the small self, I've experienced that because I know the changes that are happening. When I was a youth, when I was, in university, when I was in the experiences that we get, the things that shape your mind and the experiences of the world, experiences of the body. So we have experienced that small self or the small I. But it is continuously changing, and you're asking, it is changing, but what is the purpose of all this? Right? And this is the part that is really important. So what is the true self? If I'm changing, why would I need to experience these changes that are happening in me? Right? So this is the part that is, the purpose of life is life of purpose. Why is it that we are experiencing this, and what's the purpose of that, and what's the value of that? Anything must have value. So the purpose of life is to discover our true self, as I said, right? So we've got that material self that is continuously changing, and whatever change that is changing cannot be the true self. And that is why we see that some moments we have appreciation, we like things, other moments we, are neutral, other moments we don't like things. So he said that's continuously changing, and that's not the real thing. So what is this real thing that is unchanging? How do I experience this self? Right? So when we say what is the purpose of life, we need to understand what life is in its full magnitude. Both the journey and also that substratum that supports that journey. So what is this true self? Right? So let me talk about this true self. Right? So we all know that for our material existence that is continuously changing, there must be a substratum in us that is unchanging. And the great saints and sages say, look, to really understand the purpose of life, you need to understand your true self. Right? Now, what does the true self actually means? As I've experienced my small self, the material identity that is continuously changing, material identity that is, goes through the sukhas and the dukkhas, right? I have experienced that. But how do I experience the true self that is transcendental to this? This is the part that most people find it very difficult. Yeah, my personality has gone through changes. I experienced this. Yes, I know that. But you're telling me that how to experience the true self, right? And this is something that most places don't teach. You only have to go to spiritual abodes or gurus or reading the scriptures to really understand this true self. If you understand this true self, you would understand the purpose of life and life of purpose. Right? So let me explain. How does one experience the true self? What does it mean by that true self? And if we can define what the true self is, then we see that the purpose of our lives become more clearer. The more important thing is that the true self cannot be a theoretical concept or ideas. As how the small self, yes, we have the self-esteem, self-image, all those things, we experience it. So we know, okay, this is how, this is what my personality is. This is what my belief systems are. This is what my principles are. Those are all still at the small I level or small. But the true self can only be experienced if the small self is quiet. the small self slowly retreats. The true big self, which is this big I, will only be awakened if the small I slowly dissipates. This is the part. The problem is that the small I, this limited material I, is very big, very magnified for most people, right? Their positions, their titles, their material things. That's what's blaring ahead. And that is why the true big self is dampened. They are unable to cognize this, right? So the whole idea here is that when our small I or the small self is so magnified and it experiences all the changes that is happening in life, the emotions and all those things, that is when we step back and say, hey, is this what the whole purpose of life is, to go through the sukha dukkhas and it's continuously going on? When will it stop? Right? Moments that are very high, moments that are very low. So when will it stop? That is the important question. When will all this, what does this all mean? When does it actually all stop? Because you're tired of it. It only happens when that small self becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until it's dissipated and it's enraptured into the true self. Without that, the purpose of life will not be discovered, right? So, as you know, the colorless world can only, or the colorless thing or water can only give you the beauty of color if it is colorless at the base, right? So we need to understand the base self first. But how do we get there? And this is what the whole process of yoga is. Yoga is the process of union with the big self. When the mind becomes more unified with the big self, the small self, the material self that is always in a state of fleeting and transitoriness will quiet it. So what is this true self? How? So great, we've got this idea that is this true self. How can I experience this? What is the mode of experiencing this? The mode of experiencing this true self is essentially your introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. Allocating the time to learn to slowly quieten that small self, and eventually all you feel is that life force in you, the vibration in you. When that happens, all the material thoughts are neutralized and the true self is revealed. So it is like if I am traveling somewhere and I'm always in the car that is moving, I will not see the road, but I know it's taking me there. But if I want to see the road, I have to stop the car, get out of the car, and experience that road. And look at, hey, that's the direction it's going to. Right? So you have to get off the car for a short moment. Getting off the car is actually the meditative process of achieving that quietude. So when you continuously do this, this is what one would experience. So I have to describe that experience to you. What is the experience of the true self? Right? Otherwise, you would still be very abstract and very theoretical. So what is the true self? And I thought about this very carefully. There's 4 important characters in the self. SELF. The first thing that you know that you're experiencing that true self is the mind becomes more and more silent. The first door that opens up to the true self is that quietude of the mind. The mind becomes quieter and quieter. When I mean quiet means, it means that the thoughts or material thoughts are slowly dissipating. First thing is all the things that had an impact on you, positively giving you high exuberance or high down, all start dissipating until you come to more subtle thoughts. of the material world, even that disappears. And you'd have an experience of that silence, even though you're engaging the material world. In your sleep, in your meditational process, and also in your waking state, the mind will be quiet. A sense of silence that takes place. That is the first experience of the true self. And so I'm describing you the true self. If your mind is continuously noisy, it's far away. You're wide awake in the small self, but you are fast asleep in the true self. So this meditational process, this introspection, contemplation, reflection, slowly helps neutralize these material thoughts, and your mind attains this quietude. The first door of that true self opens up. When the mind becomes very quiet, we see that something very interesting happens. You get a sense of seamlessly integrated with everything. Sometimes we say we become more universal, more nature-centric, right? So you see that you become more nature-loving. You become more integrated with everything. You neither are detached nor attached. You are able to experience everything through this integration that takes place in you. You're no more separate entity. You become more and more fluid, more and more, spatial, more and more, wider, more and more universal in your outlook. So you become seamlessly integrated in everything, and you can put things together. You can see things in a more holistic way as opposed to piecemeal. Something happens in your mind. You can see everything is interrelated. Everything is connected. There is a symbiotic relationship between everything. And you start seeing that your perspective of things becomes more and more seamlessly integrated. So you see the things that have been very dogmatic, you start seeing more, wider and more universal perspective. Things that you hold on very hard start slowly becoming more and more porous and more, softer and gentler and more graceful. You see that in yourself, that self, but I mean yourself means the mind is now experiencing this transformation that is happening. So this is the first door of experiencing the true self. And you see that, that silence leading to the seamless integration, and it gives you the softness, the gentleness in the mind, right? It's no more harsh. It's no more crude. It's that gentleness. Everything goes, even the most difficult crisis, you are able to silently, quietly, seamlessly, simply resolve it. This is the first experience of the true self. The second experience that you start seeing is that when the mind becomes more softer, more gentler, more silent, more seamlessly integrated, the second door opens up of the true self. The second door is actually the mind, which is very closed, the mind that is very fixated starts becoming more and more porous. The mind starts expanding. The mind is able to integrate and make sense of things. And it starts, the realm of your intellect and realm of understanding and realm of experience starts expanding. And this is something that we see in that third door of that true self, the expansion of horizon of understanding, reasoning, starts taking place. That expansion is that, you are able to relate to that universe that is continuously expanding, because now your mind becomes more and more integrated with that universal substratum, that road that I'm talking about. As it becomes more and more anchored to it, as how the universe is expanding, your mind is continuously expanding. What's really interesting is that, through the expansion, you see that the mind starts even expanding to a level that it becomes, it escapes space and time. You start feeling glimpses of, the transcendentality, the glimpses of eternality, glimpses of time not touching you, right? And this is what happens to when the second door opens. You feel that expansion and this sense of transcendentality, a sense of beautiful joy. Swamiji says, Summa irukum sugam, that, unconditional joy and love. One would experience this. If you experience a true self, you will experience this. When that happens, you see that the third door opens up. Right? The third door opens up is actually, you start attaining, you're not caught up by the forces of Sugha and Dukkha, because the mind is so expanded, so universal, it escapes this clutches of Sugha, Dukkha, all this push and pull forces. And there comes a stage, it's okay, challenges are there. Well, let's take it with the stride, And this is what we call liberation. The third door of liberation takes place. Liberation means the gravity of materiality doesn't impact you. You see that there are moments that, difficult moments, challenging moments, you don't see it as a challenge. You see it as an opportunity for learning and expansion. There are moments that we have tremendous amount of pressure in our lives, and you see that you're able to flip those pressures into treasures that gives you that knowledge and the expansion. So you start seeing that, okay, there are moments that, your body has ailments, you see that, okay, this is part and parcel of the body, but my spirit is not affected by these ailments or disease. And you see that the spirit lifts up the entire body. So one becomes liberated from that vagaries of the cycle of birth and death. You're not worried about death, actually. After a while, you're able to understand death because of the expansion of the mind. You're not caught up by death, disease, poverty, ridicule. There's a sense of liberation, the sense of, freedom, the sense of, light. Your mind becomes frictionless, that liberation. You would experience that when you experience the true self. I said, this is what that self is, that is not touched by this small I or the small material identity. Right? And you see that this liberation enables you to attain that infinite possibilities and potentialities. You're willing to try new things, experience new things. Even if it fails, it's okay. You're able to pick up and learn from it, right? And finally, you see that in the last, when the silence leading to the seamless integration, the expansion of our minds, that eternality, in the E is the eternality, that you becomes, ordinary person becomes time-bound. Here you become timeless. Time doesn't touch you, right? So your body may be aging, but your mind is beautiful, wonderful, very youthful, very dynamic. There's a sense of vitality, a sense of, dynamism in your life that, the Tejas gives you that brilliance, that glow. That's what eternality actually leads one to, the liberation. And finally, one attains that finality. What does that finality means? When you discover the true self, you discover that that true self is actually, the DNA of the true self is actually that creator itself, that is source of all the creation. The spark of creation is embedded in that self that is quiet, silent, that is seamlessly integrated, that is expansionary and eternal, that is liberated from this material identity, the birth, death cycle. The whole question of birth and death doesn't arise anymore. It is only if your mind is fixated on the body, which is got, you start. So Mahans and great saints, they don't worry about birth and death because that's not what they associate the mind associate with. So as long as you're caught up in that, the small I is still very magnified and predominant in defining your personality. And the finality is essentially you are able to experience that universal identity, which we call the creator. And something very interesting happens. The whole purpose of life is actually, when we say purpose of life, means that you're trying to discover who you are. But when you discover who you are, that search for purpose stops, right? I am that. This is the finality. I am that, right? There's everything else stops. The quest for material wealth, the quest for, knowing heaven and hell, the quest for getting blessings from higher divine things, everything stops, because that is the abode that we are in, the abode of everything. And a sense of, calmness, serenity, peacefulness dawn on us. We stop asking, what is the purpose of life? As it is said, the purpose of life is the life of purpose, to be enlightened, to be living a life of that universality. And you see that that is percolated in every facet of our lives. The time when we awaken, the time we engage the world, and the time when we go to bed, we're always in that state of oneness, the state of that finality. So with that, we see that the whole quest of purpose of life stops, because the purpose is that, to be able to realize that you are the enlightened, you are the angel, you are the creator within you. You create whatever you want in your life. And you see that, when that happens, everything happens naturally. There's no sense of, everything becomes so much more easier, more frictionless, more lighter. And that's the whole purpose of life. When you have a mind that is constricted, it's always searching for the liberation. When you have the liberation, you stop searching for anything else. You stop searching for the liberation, because you are that liberated, Brahman, or the Atma, or the big I, Swamiji speaks about. So this is kind of the way of thinking about, an illumined way of experiencing it. Everything you need to be able to experience. If I switch down to the small I experience all the vagaries of life. If I flip back to a high altitude, all that dissipates. My mind becomes more and more silent, expanded, liberated, and the finality. And the mind becomes amazingly creative. You're able to integrate everything, and there is no questions, no queries. You're able to understand this. So this is the whole purpose of life, to realize your true self, to realize that you are that, enlightened substratum, to realize that we are all God packaged differently. And if we understand that, whatever package we are in, we're able to create the immense value for our own life existence and everything else.